what is the purpose of cybersecurity? I feel like, or endpoint security more particularly, I feel like that purpose has been lost. If we go back 20 years and we think about why did the first endpoint security product come around? I got my first computer about 96, 97, maybe 95, and it was a Pentium 75 PC. It had 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it ran pretty much what every PC ran back then, which was Office and Mavis Beacon teaches typing because nobody could type back then. Doom and Encarta 95. So when I got my first computer, I had a choice. Do I get the internet or do I get Encarta 95? Which will tell me everything anyway on one CD. And of course,
it's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum, and I'm all out of gum.
Who remembers that? Duke Nukem. That was my PC, and you know, I was really excited. I think about 14 years old. I got this PC, and I was a nerd. And I got my money from my paper round, and I couldn't afford the internet, so I said, oh, well, I'm going to get Encarta, and I'm going to leave the internet. And I went off to PC World, and I said, I need to buy some software for my PC. Because if I wanted to buy software, I had to go to a store to do that. I couldn't download it from the internet, and that made it very hard to transmit malware. But I went off to PC World, and I said, let me buy some cool stuff for my computer. And I came out with Norton Antivirus. Now, in hindsight, this makes absolutely no sense. I mean, this was probably a week's wages for me. So I bought Norton Antivirus. I added it onto my PC, which had 8 megabytes of RAM, and I said, I feel protected now. I'm not going to get malware, because this way, it can't give me viruses. I can't get viruses on my computer because I've got Norton Antivirus. And, you know, I felt like I've been given a big hug of safety. And that's kind of what endpoint security has become. I'm going to give you a big hug. And I was on with a very large organization yesterday. We did a demo of ThreatLocker, and they had about 600,000 endpoints, so it'll give you an idea how big they are. And the guy said to me, well, before we begin, proper tender process, like, show me your, I know you want to show me a bunch of slides, you want to show me your NASCAR slides, you want to show me your logos. And I was like, no, I'm an engineer, I don't show slides of logos and things like that. But what I realized is this is what endpoint security has become. The people who make you feel the best, they must be the best endpoint security product. If you can hug someone and make them feel great, then that's what endpoint security becomes. It's about making people feel good. And I felt good in the 90s when I bought my antivirus. I felt like I'm more protected now. I couldn't download software from the internet. I didn't have a modem. I had no email. Literally, the only way I was going to get a virus is going to PC World and buying it. But I still felt good. Instead, I spent my money on an antivirus. And then along came the internet. And that was great because IT guys, nerds, could talk to girls eventually. And that was fantastic. But I didn't go and talk to girls on the internet. No, I went to download.com. And I was like, great, I don't have to go to PC World anymore to buy software. I can download loads of software. Most of it's free, most of it's crap, and I can clog up my 1.6 gigabyte hard drive with all of this junk. So I went out on the internet and I bought all this, and then suddenly people started downloading malware. All this free software came with consequences, and I was getting pop-ups on my computer. This is actually a screen grab from the Wayback Machine. And they actually had pop-ups selling tiny bottles of liqueur on cnet.com back in the day. So I went back and I started downloading this, and my computer started going slow, and then I learned how to reinstall Windows because that's what you had to do back then. The other problem with the internet was my computer was now accessible by everybody else. So when I'm dialed up to the internet, and yes, I was dialed up, anyone could see my IP address, anyone could connect to my machine. And now at this point, that wasn't an issue, but it later became an issue because not only did I have to deal with malware being downloaded, but I had to deal with people connecting to my machine. And those people were in really scary places like Russia and China and North Korea, and most terrifying of all, Canada. Now, so I've got these two ways where people can get to my machine. I can download malware, I can download software, or I can connect to a network. And that's pretty much maintained the same since then. If someone wants to get on your PC, if someone wants to hack your computer, they've got to do one or two things. They connect to it through a network connection, or you run something on their behalf. And I have my antivirus, so I feel warm and fuzzy, and I feel like I'm cuddled. And then the reality is I'm just a sitting duck. And anyone can point at me and decide, hey, I'm going to go after this guy's computer at any point in time. And it didn't happen. Yeah, I got a load of slow, and my PC broke a load of times because I installed loads. But I didn't get hit by malware in the 90s. Everything was fine. But then 2002, something changed. the blaster virus came out, and that was one of the first major spreading viruses that actually spread via the network. Rather than a user downloading a piece of malware, the blaster virus connected to your machine and self-installed. So it installed that software, and at that point in time, there was lots of antiviruses. Corporations had antiviruses. I was working for a big corporation, and guess what? None of it helped. And suddenly my illusion of feeling warm and fuzzy went away because we got hit by malware, and a user didn't even have to do something wrong. They just had to connect to the internet. Now, Microsoft literally solved that problem in one service pack. Now, Microsoft don't do anything very fast, and this was the fastest I ever saw Microsoft add a feature ever. They said, we got hit really bad because the blaster virus not only infected all of their operating systems that were full of bugs, but it attacked the Windows Update server with all those infected operating systems. So Microsoft said, we don't want this to happen again, so they released in the service pack for Windows XP, the next service pack that came out, a Windows firewall. And literally, the problem of the endpoint, if they had the firewall turned on, being infected by someone pointing to their machine, disappeared overnight. And the antivirus could make everyone feel warm and fuzzy again. But then, 20 years later, 15 years later, well, 20 years later, or 15 years later, it happened again at a big scale. It happened lots of times in between, but at another big scale, Eternal Blue, WannaCry, 2017, spread across the internet, infected loads of machines using an exploit and connecting directly to machines. Now, this was slightly different because Eternal Blue wasn't going after workstations. People were getting infected on their workstations, but it was actually being delivered multiple ways. So someone would open it through an email attachment, WannaCry, and then it would exploit Eternal Blue on a server. And we came to this real problem that all of our servers don't have firewalls on them. So we have thousands of endpoints. They're firewalled if you set it up right. Lots of people had it turned off. There was no central management. But hey, they should have had a firewall. But our servers didn't have firewalls. And 6 weeks after Microsoft released a patch, which is a long time not to patch, but in 2017, it was considered a normal time not to patch, all of those servers got hit by Eternal Blue. And then what happened from those servers is the attackers used group policy to push out WannaCry to the entire organization. And hospitals got hit, government agencies got hit, businesses got hit all over the world. And it became a real problem. That's not supposed to be on there. OK. The other area is software. So 2 ways someone can get in. They can get in through software, and they can get in through network. So software threats could be things like viruses, spyware, rootkits, botnets, Trojans, keyloggers, and, of course, ransomware. Now, the way we try and remedy this is we keep hugging ourselves, and we put in things like antivirus and heuristics and AI and threat hunting and EDR, and we keep saying, I feel better because I went out and I bought something that's on the sticker of NASCAR or the Formula One team, and it must be really good at finding the bad guys because they managed to get a label on an F1 car. I'd love a label on an F1 car, by the way. So we make ourselves feel like, hey, we're doing great, and we keep adding these layers of detection in, but the reality is we're not. We're not able to detect every threat that's happening on our endpoint. And then even if we were able to detect all those malware threats, attackers are using good tools. One of the first tools we see nearly in every coordinated ransomware attack is advanced IP scanner. What's an attacker want to do? They want to see everything that's on your network, and even backup software. Now, this one blew my mind when I first saw it. Think about this. What's the best remedy to make sure you don't have to pay a ransom? Backups, backups, backups. Have lots of backups. But guess what attackers are doing now? They're actually sending you pre-configured packages via Office documents, via social engineering to say to your user, enable macros, and it doesn't go off and install malware because it might get detected. So what they're saying is, I'm going to take a good application, I'm going to have it pre-configured to back all of your data up to the cloud, and I'm going to send all the data to my cloud server. And attackers are just using this good software. The reality is, all of these things have one thing in common. They are all software. And all of these detection techniques aren't going to help you feel better. Now, for software to be effective as an attack tool, it has to be distributed. So we can distribute it in lots of different ways, or an attacker can distribute it. We can send an email. And yes, people will download those links on an email. We can use Teams. And a few months ago, I dropped an EXE into the general chat on ThreatLocker teams. Now, I'm the CEO of the company, so people tend to listen to what I say, but my phone often gets left out there, and it's locked, and it's got a passcode on it. But I dropped this executable into the general chat in the company teams and said, can everyone run this on their computer urgently? We are a cybersecurity company. Everyone in the company does training every single month. We have engineers, salespeople that are well-trained in security. They know the risks. They listen to these presentations, and guess what? A third of our staff open that executable. And you think, that's unbelievable. They said, but it came from the CEO. Well, guess what? My phone gets left out behind stage all the time, and all someone needs to do is point the face at me, and it'll probably unlock. So they all opened it. Now, it wasn't malicious. It was actually something they genuinely wanted them to run, and it was also pre-configured and allowed in ThreatLocker, so it would run. But I was just intrigued to see who was going to question it. Of course, we see general email attachments. Things have got better. If I think they haven't got better and people haven't got better, just think back in 2001. The love bug infected 1/3 of the world's business computers. That was an email attachment that said, I love you.vbs. Think how lonely people were back then to open that attachment. Social media, targeted social media attacks, focusing on what people, who they vote for, what their political beliefs are, what their religious beliefs are, and putting ads on social media to people in companies. The bigger the company, the more likely this is going to happen to gain access. And even embedding malware in Office documents, leaving USB drives in the parking lot. Rubber duckies is a common one. Someone offered a Tesla employee $500,000 to plug in a rubber ducky into a Tesla computer. Now, what they failed to realize is that's in California. $500,000 isn't that much. Of course, macros we see quite often. How often do we see the screen? Who would click enable macros on the screen? Hopefully nobody. I wouldn't, but users do all the time. But guess what? It doesn't matter if you can, because there's enough vulnerabilities out there to not need the user to click it. The other way malware can be distributed, or software, is through vulnerability. So we saw the Blaster get distributed through a vulnerability. We saw WannaCry get distributed through a vulnerability. But just last year, the end of last year, there was an Office vulnerability. I opened up, first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is look at my phone and see what's happening in the world. And I say, new Office, zero-day Office vulnerability comes out that allows attackers to gain access to someone's machine and run malicious code. By the way, every vulnerability says that, even if you can't exploit it. So when you read the news, it's really hard to figure out, is this really a concern, or is this just bloatware or hype? So I called our support team up and I said to them, can you do me a favor? There's a new vulnerability apparently in Office. Can you replicate it? Half an hour later, I was in the office, and this is a video of what they showed me. They said, here's an Office document. Macro is not enabled. Open this document. So I open this document, and Office crashes about as fast as it functions, and Office crashed. Now, Office is crashing, so I'm not thinking anything too serious like this. I'm like, OK, what's going to happen now? The next thing that happens is we wait, and PowerShell will launch. Now, what happened was I didn't have to click enable macros. I didn't even have to enable editing. It literally crashed. PowerShell ran, and then it downloaded a piece of malware on the machine. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I get a resume in my inbox, and I'm expecting a resume in my inbox, which is pretty much all the time, I'm not scared to open a docx file. I'm not thinking this is malicious. I won't click enable macros. If I open that, that would potentially run on my machine. It wouldn't for another reason, but this is all that was required. Within 10 minutes, a mid-level support tech had figured out how to make an Office document that downloads and runs malware on someone's computer. Essentially, extract the Office file with 7-zip, because Office files are just zip files, edit one of the text files and put those blurry lines of code in there. And all those blurry lines of code do is a base64 encoded PowerShell command. In this case, the PowerShell command said download files, boo.exe from the internet, and execute it on this machine. Now, of course, Microsoft's patched that, and you should always patch your software, but it wasn't helpful that day. We also had an antivirus enabled that did nothing. So if we want to be able to actually do something rather than just feel good, we need to go above looking for bad things. We need to consider what do we need in our environment, and we can essentially allow the software we need and block everything else. If you think about your environment, how many applications do your users run? 5, 10, 20, 10,000? Doesn't change very often. How often does a user say, I need to run something that's not already permitted in my organization? Whether it's Office or Zoom or Chrome or GoToMeeting, if you say, I'm only going to allow what I need in my business, You not only stop ransomware and malware and spyware and rootkits from running, but you also stop shadow IT. You also stop users downloading programs they shouldn't do, and it takes away from your IT support load. Because think about this. You give someone a laptop, 5 years later, it comes back, and it's exactly as it was when out, minus a smash screen. I can't do anything about that. Every time you open software on your computer, whether that software is Microsoft Office or Google Chrome or Angry Birds or Zoom, that software can see everything you can see. Malware is just software. So when you open malware, it can see all of your data. Everyone focuses quite often about taking away administrative permissions. You should take away administrative permissions, but don't have any illusions. Don't go to your customers and say, we're taking away admin permissions, because if you take away admin permissions, you can't run ransomware, because guess what? We did a webinar last year with one of our partners, and we ran 10 samples of ransomware, and every single one of them ran under a normal user account. Every time you run something, that software can see everything that you can see. And if that software is exploited or weaponized against you, it can see all of your data. The best solution to stop software being used against you is to block it if you do not need it. Whether it's an executable, whether it's a DLL, a script file, a PY file, it doesn't matter. Only allow the software you need, and if someone wants to introduce something new, they request it, and you approve it very, very easily. Now, in addition to blocking software, we need to think about, well, what about the good software? Because Microsoft Office, I trust Office, well, marginally. I use Office. I use PowerShell. I mean, you guys probably use PowerShell nearly every week. You update scripts, check people's hard drive space, run different things. You need PowerShell. But what if Office calls out to PowerShell? Don't know where that's from. And it uploads your data to the internet. So this is a screenshot from that previous video. It called out to PowerShell. What if it literally just ran a command to upload all your data? We're not talking about malware here. We're not talking about software. We can't block that. So we need to go above just controlling what can run, but we need to control what the software can do once it's running by ring fencing it. What ring fencing does essentially is it allows you to say, Office is allowed to run, but it can't talk to these apps. PowerShell is allowed to run, but it doesn't need to see my files. How many applications do you think run on your computer? If you go into search on your computer and you type star.exe, how many do you think are going to come up? Every one of those can see your data. That little Logitech support app in the bottom right corner of the screen, made in Taiwan, can see your computer. Every software you run can see it. But if you just check a box and say, don't let this software see my protected files, if that software is compromised, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it won't be able to see your data or upload your data. Control what applications can go out to the internet. We're able to foil the SolarWinds Orion breach exploits just by saying they couldn't get out to the internet to get instruction because they didn't need to. The Exchange vulnerability, we're able to stop that by stopping IIS from going out to the internet and downloading files. We're able to stop it from running executables on your machine by using allow listing. If you control what apps can do, you can harden your environment. The other thing you need to do is think about, how do I protect my network? So the Windows firewall, great. Turn it on, it blocks everything. Kind of. A couple of problems with it. The first one is, anyone connect to the Wi-Fi here? It's really slow. Anyone connect to the Wi-Fi here? First thing you see on Windows 10 is, do you trust this network? Now, I trust most of you said no, but the question is do you trust your employees, your users, to say no when they connect to their home network or Starbucks or anything else? And when they click yes, that opens up RPC ports on the firewall. It allows sharing on that firewall. The other problem is, what happens when someone goes into your office? So before I started ThreatLocker, I was working on a ransomware case, recovery case, so that's what I did a lot of. And they actually had really good controls in place. They're actually using allow listing as well. And all of their file servers shares had been encrypted. And we pulled every PC out of this environment, and we couldn't find anything. So we were thinking fileless malware, someone built something in, but then we found another machine. That was a check-in machine. This was a school. And when you go into a school in Florida, pre-K, kids have to be checked in. And if they're not checked in, the school has to call everyone in the database every 15 minutes until someone says the kid's not coming to school. The reason being is it's hot here. Kids get left in the car. Now, this check-in machine was not controlled by their IT department. It was controlled by somebody else. It was pinned on the wall and had TeamViewer running on it. And it was on their LAN. It got an address from their DHCP server. So one of the challenges when you think about firewalling your servers, you say, well, how can I do that when everything's getting dynamic addresses. Everything can see my server. So if one device is compromised, it can attack your server and can access your files. What we can do is we can allow you to limit which devices can connect to your server, even when you're using DHCP. So if I go into the office today and my IP address is 192.168.10.51, the server will open the ports necessary just while my computer's on the network. And then as soon as my computer disconnects from the network, it closes that IP address on. And it dynamically updates the ACL based on the location of your trusted devices. Not just on your LAN, but on the public internet. I had a client call me up on the 2nd of July last year and said to me, hey, I'm really worried that my RMM is going to get compromised this weekend. And I said, okay. He said, can we do something with your network access controls? I said, yeah, we can shut it down so no one can talk to it. And they're using allow listing, so it won't be able to run any ransomware that's pushed out. That's great. But he says, can we lock it down so no one can see it? So we said, that's fine. So on the server, we created a dynamic ACL, so only his 2,000 dynamic endpoints around the world could actually even see that port 443 on his RMM. Now, I did say to him, you know, hackers work other weekends as well. I started off by saying, what is the purpose of endpoint security? Is it to make you feel good, or is it to stop bad shit from happening? In 1995, 1996, when I bought my first antivirus, it was to make me feel good. I got it, and I felt good. I spent a whole week's wages on it. But the reality is, the purpose of endpoint security is to stop bad stuff from happening. And whether you feel hugged, whether you feel loved or not, it's not going to help you. If you want to get control of your environment, you have to think about, how can I actually block threats from happening? And the way to do that is not to chase down every threat, but to block software that you do not trust, block network connections you do not trust. Now, I like to think about security in a triangle rather than layers. Quite often I hear, security is like an onion, peels back layers, it's got different levels. My previous business was an email security company. My previous 2 businesses, actually. It is the worst business to ever be in. Every day you get a new call. You blocked too much, you didn't block enough. No one's ever happy. But we had 14 antiviruses scanning your email that came through it. And you know why we did that? For marketing. Because apparently if you have 14, it's better than having 2 or 3. The reality is, stuff still got through the 14, and if anything ever got stopped, it was going to be stopped by the 1st or 2nd. Because the idea of detecting every threat, every different company is using the similar techniques. They're looking for known bad. But that said, there's 3 ways you can stop a security threat. There's the human way. If I send malware to everyone in this room, I promise I won't. If you don't open it, the threat is gone. The human can interrupt any threat. You don't have control over your users. You can train them, you can make them retrain, you can do everything. And even if you do that, they still click on an executable sent to them on Teams. Detection. You've got a lot of teddy bear cuddles here. Not saying that you shouldn't have it, not saying it's not important, but it's a little bit of a fake sense of security. You can't guarantee that, or you have no control over whether your EDR is going to pick up a threat before it eats your data or uploads it to the internet. Who here knows what a rubber ducky is? So rubber ducky, one of the coolest tools you can buy for $59. We did a class in them last week, and I normally have one in my pocket, and I don't think. It's a USB device that acts as a keyboard. When you plug it in, it types at 1,000 words per minute. At every trade show we go to, bar this one, because I can't find mine, we ask a question, or we make a bet. I've got a rubber ducky here. If you plug it into your machine, and it gets blocked by your EDR or your endpoint security, you can keep my rubber ducky. If it steals your data, I get to keep your data. 4 companies have taken that challenge. One of them was one of the biggest airlines in the world, not the one that's our customer. And they plugged it in at a conference saying, this was the CISO, by the way, plugged it in, and it uploaded all of his files to the internet without even an alarm. And the reason being is because it misused software that was already on the machine. It used PowerShell to upload those files. Detection helps you identify known and common threats. It will not stop 0 days. It will not stop the threats that are going to put you out of business. If you want to feel good, if you actually want to secure your environment, focus on controls. Focus on things like dual-factor authentication. They are absolutes that you are in control of. You don't know if your user will give away a password. You don't know if your email filter will detect that bad link. But you do know if I've got dual-factor, they need their phone and their password. Focus on things like allow listing, block untrusted software, ring fencing, control what software can do, and even network controls. If you build your security stack around controls, you are actually going to be doing something to put yourself in a better position and not taking, at very best, vitamin pills to make you feel better. We can help you with 5 controls, which allow from allow listing to controlling what software can run, elevation, network controls. So elevation is essentially allow a program to run as an admin while the user is not an admin. You check a box, it's very easy. Ring fencing and storage controls. If you want to find out more about how we've deployed controls to thousands of MSPs, tens of thousands of businesses worldwide, come by our booth or scan the QR code to book a demo. We do like a 45-minute walkthrough of our product, and we'll show you how it all fits together, how we can stop ransomware in your environment, how we can stop malware, and how we can do it not using magic, not using smoke and mirrors, but using sensible and tangible controls. I appreciate everyone taking the time to listen to me today. Thank you very much.